Thank you guys for being up for this too. I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah.
All right. So now I have to do a little poking around to get to the actual page.
I have to fix my hair because the thing is missed it.
You look great.
You look terrific, Tonya.
You look fit. Fabulous.
I put makeup on for this today, so
Oh my gosh,
I forgot. I couldn't even find my makeup bag.
you're doing the deal for us. That's awesome.
I know what that's like.
Put makeup on for this today.
I actually went into the office.
I forgot.
You're doing the deal for us. That's awesome.
I know what that's like.
Put makeup on for this today.
I actually went into the office.
I forgot.
Okay, so we are live. We have. You're doing the deal for us. That's awesome. Okay, we're going to be live, and there are people in the room, and we have cats crossing. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm hoping we won't have a lot of feedback and issues and like that. If people, by the way, hi everybody, welcome to our first Facebook Live adventure. My name is Mike Kelly. I'm professor at Loyola. You have in front of us two amazing school mental health professionals, Dorey Delikowski and Tonya Hernandez, and they're going to introduce themselves in a minute. But what I want you to know is this is our first time doing this, our maiden voyage of a attempt to do the schoolsocialwork.net Facebook Live. So please bear with us. If you have questions and comments, you can put them into the chat and just keep them coming. What I'd love for you to do while we're getting started is if you could just in the chat introduce yourself about where you work, what your practice is, any questions you might have about the certificate program or anything you want to ask us about just kind of schoolsocialwork.net. We will get into any and all of those things. All right. Okay. So what today is going to be is an effort for us to kind of tie together some really important things that that this mighty group of school clinicians have done over the last 2 years. This is the kind of capstone of capstones of their work together with Loyola. Tonya and Dorey are graduated, and that's a fantastic thing to say, and congratulations. They have gone through 2 years of a 15 credit, 2-year, 99% online program designed to add to their already extensive repertoire of skills and ideas about how to do school mental health. And they were in a cohort model, that came together twice a month and looked at a bunch of issues that I'm sure they're going to get into in a little bit. And we asked them to, towards the later part of the first semester, to actually look at their own school context, the issues in their schools, and essentially decide what are some things that I want to see changed about my school? What do I want to do that's different? What would be helpful to my school community? And so what we're going to ask both of them in a minute to do is to talk about each other's projects, not necessarily talk about their own, but talk about each other's, talk about what was meaningful to them, what they learned, what's exciting to them about that. And then we're going to, because we are a group and there are people popping on, and that's fantastic. We already have about 10 of you already in here, which is great. If you have questions and comments and you want to throw those our way, we will have time for that at the end. Okay. So let me throw over to you both just to introduce yourselves a little more, because I will brag on you plenty in this next hour. But if you would just talk a little bit about your background as a practitioner and anything you want to say about that, and then we'll get started. So maybe Dorey, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Dorey Delikowski. I live in central Wisconsin. I'm a school psychologist, and I've been practicing school psych for about 17 years and 10 in the last role that I've been in my small rural school district in central Wisconsin. And I came to find the program because about 3 years ago, I just hit a spot, like I was burnt out. And for a few reasons, but one of them was that I felt like I needed more in my repertoire of mental health practices in my bag, because more and more kids were coming with more and more issues, and I just needed more. I also was in a spot where administration was not real supportive and active in our building, and so I was really looking for a place where I could learn more, feel safe, feel part of something that I could then bring back to my building. So that's what led me to the program at Loyola, and I'm so really pleased that I did it, and very, very happy about that. And the program has been wonderful, and Dr. Kelly has been wonderful, and you meet amazing people. So.
Great. Thank you, Dorey. That's very, very kind too. And this is going to be certainly about the SMHAPP program, School Mental Health Advanced Practice Program. It is going to be also really about these two and what they've learned and what they're doing. I imagine, I didn't tell them in advance to do this, but I imagine this very real, serious time we're in with a pandemic and continued unrest and an uprising around racial violence and civil rights will also be maybe part of the conversation today. But for sure, I want you all just to get to know them a little bit as I've gotten to. So Tonya, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I am Tonya Hernandez, and I am in the Clark County School District, which is in Las Vegas, Nevada. We're the 5th largest school district in the nation. So the absolute opposite of Dorey's little school district over there. I have been a school social worker with Clark County School District for, I guess, the past 18, almost 19 years now as we move into the next school district. Nevada has never had a lot of school social workers. We had 5 when I first started, and then we brought ourselves up to 20. And then about 5 years or so ago, we have a social worker in schools grant that our governor pushed through, where suddenly we could hire more social workers for the school district. So right now we're up to 60 licensed school social workers that are actually hired by our district, and the remainder 200 are contracted through a contractor that we kind of work with, but they work within our schools and with us. So I came to the SNAP program kind of for the same reasons that Dorey did. There were so many things that were happening in my district, and I felt like I needed more information on school-based mental health and how to implement that inside of such a large district. I was suddenly kind of thrown into my supervisor calls it a quasi-leadership position, where I was over so many of those social workers, about 50 of them that I oversee, and they were all looking at me on how do we do this in the schools. But I was burnt out too. I was just, kept trying to do things and didn't feel like I could get any momentum on my ideas and the things that I wanted done. And so coming through this program and learning the skills and working with Professor Kelly and especially with Dorey and the others that were in our cohort just really reignited my vigor and helped me to kind of understand the process of how to go about making actual change happen inside of your in my case, it's a district level because of where I'm at. But how does that then filter down into your school so that you can make those changes inside of schools that are going to be long lasting and sustainable?
Awesome. So thank you, Tonya, and thank you, Dorey. So as you've just heard, here are 2 people. They have met in person once, given this program. One is in Nevada, one is in northern Wisconsin. Very different school contexts, but they've come together, gotten to know each other, gotten to be good friends. I love that this program has been able to do that in multiple ways, and you're going to hear about these 2 and what they've done with that. So I want to say a little bit about what this program is. I mean, some of you that have come here today are probably a little bit aware if you've gone to other sites and other things that I have helped create. But I want to do a little bit of a 5-minute on what it is. tell you a little bit about my own background and how I came to do this work. And then I'm going to ask them, as I said a minute ago, to introduce each other around what their projects have been and kind of what they've learned from each other in this wonderful kind of cohort that I've gotten to be part of in the last couple of years. So I am a school social worker myself. I was a school social worker from 1992 to 2006 in direct practice. I was also a family therapist during that time and a youth minister at my church. In the midst of all of that, I got very interested in evidence-based practice and what was the basis for what I knew and what I didn't know. I also was at a very early stage. This is very pre-MTSS. We didn't have that phrase at all, PBIS even. I was very interested in data and how to collect it and how to use it. And so I found myself getting a PhD in some parts because I wanted to learn more. I wanted to challenge myself, and I wondered if I might want to be a teacher. And so I got into that. I did enjoy all that. And then I've spent the last 15 years at Loyola being a researcher largely concerned with what we're going to talk about today, which is what Tonya was just saying. Actually, both of them were just saying, Dorey was saying in a different way. Certainly, what are the conditions of practice for people in school mental health? What are the things that people say they do? What do they say that are the things that get in their way? How do they feel about what they do? And what is that issue of burnout that both of them have articulated already? And how do we deal with that? Because one of the things everybody who's on today knows, and I don't need to tell you, but it's important to put out loud because we're doing things about it through this program, is the very real working conditions, even pre-pandemic, even pre all the things we're in now, where most of us are in a school where we're the only one who does what we do, or we're in a setting where we're in multiple schools. We're in a constant state of needing to re-articulate and explain what we do to the people above us. We're also sometimes under real threat where people say, well, why should we have you? What's the benefit of having you in our school? So all of those things have been very live and real. And so I wanted to do research around what do we know about those things? What can we do to empower and support the school mental health people who do this amazing frontline work? So that's led me to this thing that we're talking about today, which is that it is not enough to just give people whatever they get in their master's program and then send them off. Because mostly what we know is when people get into that school setting, it's very likely that the people that they work with, again, will not be a direct supervisor who has the knowledge of what this job is. It'll be a principal or a special ed director, most likely. And additionally, they'll be pretty isolated and they will not necessarily have a large resource kind of community to join and to bounce things off of. So I wanted to create a program once I got to Loyola for a while that basically tried to fill in some of those gaps. Certainly it's a lot of stuff I wish I had learned in graduate school myself when I was there. And so I tried to give some of that. It's certainly also very current and updated with a lot of very relevant things that you're about to hear from both of our panelists today. So, all right, last thing I'll say on this, and then I do want to have them talk for a while. The program itself, it is 2 years, it is 15 credits. You can do it where you're sitting today. You have to be in a school in some form. Most people have been employed by a school. We've had a few people that have been working in a school through an agency, but it's by and large people that are school employed. You don't have to be a social worker. We have school psychologists here. We love Dorey's school psychologist lens. It's awesome. We have school counselors that have done this with us. I currently have in our 4th cohort someone who's a special educator who does mental health work in her school, SEL work. So we're very interested in any and all school educators concerned with mental health. You will be, if you apply to this program, you would be part of a cohort. So what you're about to hear from Dorey and Tonya is what it meant for them to be part of a group of 11 people that met twice a month and got to know each other and worked on things together. That will be really central to this program because we want that to be a community that continues after they graduate. We want them to find new ways to continue to collaborate with me and others. The second thing is you do a lot of intensive looking at your school and the role of your mental health role in your school. We look a lot at evidence-based practice, what we know and what we don't know, why we know it. We look very critically at how to collect and use data meaningfully. And we have a whole class devoted to that. And then we also are really interested, and maybe this will even be something that Dorey and Tonya talk about today too, we are really interested in giving people new clinical tools and skills directly related to clinical practice. And so that's one of the ways that shows up can be in the strength-based intervention class we do, where we give you exposure to solution-focused ideas, motivational interviewing, mindfulness stuff. And all of this comes together with the larger kind of project that these guys worked on, which is what we call a school change project. So it's not just an individual kiddo you're trying to help. It's not just, a classroom you're in. I see an issue in my whole school. It affects my school. It affects the kids in my school. It could affect the parents, teachers, all of those. I want to do something about it at that level. And so we spend time trying to empower and train and equip people with some of the tools they need to do that. So you're going to hear two pretty different examples of those projects, but you're also going to hear, I think, people that really made an effort to do that. So maybe I could just kind of let you guys decide how you want to do this. I'm going to ask you both to talk about each other's work for a while. And certainly I'm starting to see some people introduce themselves, and that's awesome. We got about 20 people in the room right now. But if people want to also ask questions as they hear Dorey and Tonya talk, please do that, and I will moderate that. So who'd like to go first?
I can go first. Tonya and I talked earlier, and
Okay.
I said I'd go for it. So I actually am going to pull up just some notes because I don't want to forget anything amazing about Tonya, because she's amazing to start with. She's an amazing person. So Tonya, as she mentioned earlier, she works for the 5th largest school district in the country, which blows me away because I work probably in one of the smallest school districts, but it's been an amazing partnership. And I've learned a ton from Tonya, and I really relied on her quite a bit throughout my project. And she's just been an awesome cohort partner to work with, and also has become a good friend. So Tonya's project, she's in the biggest district in the country. So, go big or go home, right? Her project was really big. And her project was to create school-based mental health services for the district, the Clark County School District. So as you can imagine, so this is like 360 schools, Tonya, is that right?
Right.
Like a lot of schools. I work in one district in one school building, right? So to me, this is like, wow. So she has a ton of energy and a lot of tenacity and persistence, and her personality is so bubbly and positive that really helped move things along. But she's really lived through the history of the district in Clark County. So like she said earlier, like when she started, there were 5 school social workers, right? And now she's in that liaison role and oversees like 55, 60 social workers. And I just want to say, in my district, we don't have social workers. So what I gained from the perspective of the school social worker has been tremendous. So back to Tonya though. So within her first year of being in the SMHAPP program, she started to share her ideas and thoughts with our cohort about what she wanted to do. And, I think just like a lot of us, maybe some of us had pie in the sky ideas that we realized were big and maybe could have led to us feeling overwhelmed as we moved through that. And Tonya just continued to, she acknowledged that, and with the help of Dr. Kelly and the cohort, realized though that, this is a project, this is gonna be an ongoing project for quite a few years, and this is something I'm passionate about, I really wanna do. So she continued to keep this on the front burner with her administration. So she kept talking to her peers, educating her colleagues. She created outlines for her framework for bringing school-based mental health services to the schools. This was her passion, right? So creating visuals, things that she could share with people as she met them. I remember her saying, I'll talk to anybody and everybody that wants to talk about this. So she kept things with her so that she could be an advocate for her work. And, a lot of those things we did learn in that first year, creating logic models and things that would help us promote our project. And then she conducted a needs assessment. So like 61 schools, interviewing administrators, getting their perspective, getting their ideas. She gathered additional data from other social workers in her building. She enlisted information from teachers. She wanted everybody's voice. So while she's doing this, though, there's like a ton of changes happening in her district, big changes, new superintendent, new administrators. And I think that this is something that happens a lot, as the past few years has shown in this cohort alone. All of us had some form of significant change that either shifted us in the right direction or made it a barrier. So she just kept at it and kept promoting her project with the folks that she needed to, the new folks coming in. And she had to work through barriers like people saying, we don't use the word mental health in schools. Well, that's a pretty big barrier when you're trying to promote school-based mental health services in your building, and what that's going to look like at all 3 tiers of intervention. And, you know, so she had to really continue to work with those people and help them understand why this was so important, and provide the data to support that. So all of that continued for her throughout the first year, and I think that really set the stage for her second year. So, you know, her project final paper is like 55 pages. So, you know, she had a lot going on, but, you know, sifting through that first year with all of the classes that we had, meeting twice a month online to talk with each other and get assistance from each other and guidance from Dr. Kelly, I think really helped many of us set the stage. So she really set the stage for her second year, because now she was, you know, people were in a place where they were starting to understand and listen. And so the more that happened, the more she was like, I am jumping in the macro pool here. I'm going to move this forward, because people were seeing her as a leader. And she was already a leader before, but I think some of the things that we learned in this program helped that to be more solidified for her. So she continued to create a clear action plan. What is this going to look like, right? So how do I now really make this super clear? This is what it's going to be in our buildings. So using implementation science and all of the things that we learned in implementation science about moving a new initiative forward, and using that logic model that she created the first year. And then really looking for like-minded individuals to be on her team who were willing to work with her on building the referral process for the school-based mental health, and people who wanted to help move this forward. So now she's getting people in her camp and not doing it alone, because none of these projects that we do can be done alone. Even though we all kind of thought we wanted that would be the case in the beginning, I think we learned pretty quickly this is not a do-it-yourself model, and not because your ego takes over and you want to do it yourself, but because you want it done, right? You want it done kind of the way you envision it. But I mean, that was how it was for me, and so I think that this program was one way that helped all of us to realize, get your team, get them organized, and have them helping you along the way. So not only did they have to create the referral process, you know, they continue to share research about school-based mental health, had to kind of reflect on what had been done in the past, what worked, what didn't work, continue identifying those barriers that pop up along the way, but also defining the role of the social worker in this framework. So that's another big endeavor that is within this project that Tonya is continuing to work on, and to identify the tiers of intervention, knowing that her district is doing a lot of tier 1 around restorative justice and SEL. She could focus more in on the tier 2 and tier 3 within this framework, and having her team help and assist with that. So it's a big project, and she's done amazing with it. And she also realizes this might take 3, 4, maybe 5 years to really get it to the place where it's running the way that she envisions it. But it's got an amazing start. Tonya has talked, and all this Tonya has done while, I'm sorry, my cat keeps coming up here. Wow, and I believe, right, like you're in another program too, Tonya. So she's a very hard worker. And she's even mentioned, well, maybe I will work towards my doctorate in the future. So that just kind of tells you, this is lifelong learning for her. And I'm very excited to see where her project, where it ends up in a couple of years. And I know we'll be in touch. So it'll be fun to see it move into its next stages.
Thank you, Dorey. Oh, I think Professor Kelly, you're muted.
I want to say I want to amplify something and then I'm muted. That's not going to work very well. But I wanted to thank you, Dorey, for kind of opening a bunch of things I want to ask you both to comment on later. And one of them, I think that you used the phrase jump in the macro pool. And, the idea that so much of what we do when we enter schools is very micro, is very kid focused, and should be, is very caseload focused. And one of the things we try to really do in this program is really challenge people to look not just beyond that, because that's not important, because it totally is, but what is happening earlier in that kid's life before he or she gets to you? What is happening in your school that may create more conditions that you have more referrals for special ed, for discipline, for whatever. And I think Tonya's project was a really good example of how you have to change at a system level to really start to see some gains at the practitioner level. I also just want to brag on Tonya a little bit. She put together the plan that Dorey talked about basically in 3 days, right? You did a lot of it before. You laid a lot of groundwork, but a lot of what you wound up running with for this pandemic time was in 3 days. And she was able to then put together a webinar that we posted on our sites, and that has been seen by over 8,000 people around the country at this point, Tonya. Yeah. So yeah, she's made a real impact in her own state. Obviously, she's made an impact to the field. And what's great about it is you're going to hear now about Dorey and the way her impact has been made as well, and the value we place on, decide where you want to enter and make your difference. So Tonya, you want to talk about Dorey a little bit?
I would love to talk about Dorey. So I just have to say, I just love Dorey. I don't know how we became our cohort partners. I don't remember how that process happened, if we were assigned by Professor Kelly or if we picked one another, but I couldn't have had a better partner that I have been able to work with. She has been my little cheerleader in the background when I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I could call her, text her. And when we met with each other in July last year, in Chicago, it was like we were just old friends who just connected and clicked. And yeah, it's just been absolutely amazing. And I feel that way a lot about a lot of the people in our cohort. But Dorey will always have a special place in my heart for all of her hard work and what she does and her family. And it's just amazing. So Dorey is a little go-getter as well. She is a natural leader in her little district as well. And the project that she wanted to implement in her district, I feel, is just as large as the one that I was trying to implement in my district. It's just a size comparison, but it was just as hard and just as much work for her to have to do it. What I was impressed about Dorey when she wrote about her paper is that she had the insight back in the fall of 2016, before her district or her school even saw that there was a need for tier 1 social emotional learning interventions at her school. And she wrote for her, and she received a grant so that she could get the zones of regulations for every class in her little school district, K through 6, right? Or is it K through 5?
K through 6 is elementary, yeah.
So including special education teachers and things that were going on. So she had kind of some support with her administration in writing the grant. And he was, of course, very excited that, she had received this grant. But other than that, and like kind of being the cheerleader in the background, it was like, yeah, okay, kind of go do your thing. So in January 2017 through like June of 2017, even with the lack of administrative support that they held book studies where they had teachers volunteer to come, and she explained what the zone of regulations is or are, how they work basically, how they could implement it inside their classroom, the types of things that they could actually do with it, even without that administrative buy-in. Then in May of 2018, her district caught up to Dorey. And so the state of Wisconsin actually caught up to Dorey. And they made a guide for districts that they had to assist in their implementation of social emotional learning. And so here Dorey is already with this zone of regulations that she wrote this grant for 2 years prior. Their state is now saying that they have to implement this. So she already has this little golden egg. And the question was now, how do I get teachers to actually implement it? How do I get buyback from administration? So as she's kind of going through and teaching and doing different things, she got the school counselor on board. The school counselor actually wrote a letter saying, wow, I love this new little project that you're doing. And that, if you get things figured out, I want to kind of be in there too, just figure out who the stakeholders are. And so it became, there was 4 of them that ended up kind of working on it together. And then her district went through a major change. So one principal had to leave because of medical reasons. And so then her principal had to kind of step up and cover both the high school, secondary school, and the elementary school. So that person didn't have a whole lot of time. And then the following year, they got a new principal and a new administrative team that just really opened everything up as to what Dorey was doing. And she credits her success to this new administrative team. But I think it's maybe a combination of the data that she collected. She did a full survey of her school in the 18-19 school year and asked every teacher and got 100% successful. They like answered the survey, which I was surprised. I didn't think that was possible. So it shows me though that like they respect you and your leadership, that they were willing to, go through that and kind of do that. So 100% participation in that was pretty impressive. And so she kind of got a good indication on there of how many of them were actually doing the zones of regulations, how many weren't. And she figured out like how many of them, why, if you weren't doing it, why? Like, did you need more? I'm sorry for the noise in my background. I'm in my kitchen and my family's cooking breakfast. Guys, I can hear you. Sorry. So anyway, they started like figuring out like why aren't they, if they're not doing it, why, right? And then they really wanted kind of more hands-on, like how do we create the projects? How do we actually implement it? How do we build it into our curriculum? And so Dorey and her little team went to work and they figured out ways that they could end up doing that. And her project goal after the first year kind of switched to that building teacher capacity so that they could actually teach those zones of regulation, because that was like the most important thing for her. Her first year, I think, was kind of like the rest of ours, where it was just really challenging, yet it was encouraging. It was this really like bipolar kind of feelings that we had, right? So we're really challenged, yet it was so encouraging, yet we were exhausted at times. And then finally, it was like really rewarding. And I think that coming on every other week with the SNAP program and listening to this nice cohort and knowing, oh, this is normal. You're feeling the same thing? Really? Wow, I didn't know. I thought it was just me. It's like, no, this is how change works and how it happens. And it's not so exhausting when you realize that everything else is in there. She wrote this amazing quote that I want to quote her verbatim in here. So she just said that I am incredibly grateful, not during the course of this first year, our district was under the direction of a new administration, but without their leadership, support, and encouragement, I know this project would not have gotten off the ground. I'd been working on this project in years prior to the shift of administration and had learned that without the administrative leadership, the project was not moving. And I think that's the same thing that I had on my project, is how do I get them to understand what's going on and to understand that the zones of regulation is important and we have it here. It's already there for us. We need to start administering this and getting them kind of on board. But I think it is through the implementation science that we learned and the keys and techniques that we learned that allow Dorey to get the the data that her school needed to see this is something that teachers do want, then the backing of her school that was happening. So I think that it was her, not resiliency, but her, oh my goodness, I'm having one of those 50+ year moments where you can't think of the word you're looking for. Her her introspective like this, right? Like basically your
Intuition?
What was it?
Intuition?
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. Your intuition of realizing that, wow, we're headed into this direction. The country's headed in this direction with ESSA and everything else, that we're going to need social emotional learning. And then you writing that grant and getting that was very preemptive. So I think that a lot of times we think, wow, we only did this much in 2 years, but in actuality, you were starting on this 2 full years before we even got into the program and just met walls like the rest of us had. And so this opened it up for us. And what's great was that in fall of 2019, you started training with full administrative support. And all of a sudden, this became like, this is what it is that we needed to do, right? And so teachers started actually doing it, working with it and teaching it. You started having all of these trainings and things that were going on with it. And then the pandemic kind of happened. And so then things kind of, took a backseat like it did with most of us. But you have a wonderful plan in realizing that this is going to take an additional 3 to 5 years, just like on my plan, to get the change in the school and to get them to see that this is a systemic change that we need and a process that we kind of have to go through and work with what we have, right? And then try to figure out ways to make it even better. The last thing I want to say about Dorey's paper is, again, another quote that I just thought was amazing in here because, and it talks to the SMHAPP program. And she says, I learned skills from the SMHAPP program that I have been able to apply directly to this project in my current practice as a school psychologist. I have a much more positive view of my school district now. Our new administrators have provided the leadership and support that is required when a systems change is being proposed. So I think, honestly, Dorey, it doesn't matter who your administrators would have been. Yes, it absolutely, you need administrative support. I'm not saying that, but don't sell yourself short on your guidance and your leadership and your ability to see where your school needed to go and the data that you pulled together and getting your team together. It wouldn't have happened without you being there. So you were definitely the key stakeholder in that and the key change agent. And I'm proud to call you my friend.
Oh, thanks.
Wow. Thank you, Tonya. Thank you, Dorey. I want to brag on Dorey a little more too. One of the things, Dorey, you did that was so inspiring to me, a couple of things. One is you were really able, I think, to stand in the place of being a school psychologist and being, able to speak from how things look differently to you in that role. And also, I think we really made an effort, since most of us were school social workers, to welcome you and also to have you tell us the things that you didn't know because of school social work not being, like you said, in your district, right? So I felt like that was both really instructive, but it was also pretty quickly clear that you were just part of this group in lots of meaningful ways. And you taught me a lot as well. I think what was also really clear, and I put links to lots of things you guys did in the chat on Facebook Live, so people can go read them. Dorey wrote several things as part of the SMHAPP program. I asked people to write articles for our schoolsocialwork.net site, as well as maybe do things like this. And so Dorey settled on this kind of image and metaphor of a journey. And I wanted to just really thank you for that, because as I work with future cohorts, I'm going to really incorporate some of that. I'm going to have them read your articles, but I'm also going to ask them to think about, like, if it's a journey that we invite a school to come along with us on, what are the things you need for a journey? And you wrote very eloquently about, like, you need to pack, right? Like, you need to know that sometimes you're going to do a really well-built plan and then the place isn't open, or, there's a block in the road, or, all the things that we can incorporate into that. And I want to, as I go forward in doing this work with future cohorts, I want to incorporate that in addition to what several of you have referenced already, which is that the implementation science literature and the work around what it takes to actually move things in schools it's a minimum 3 years, usually 3 to 5. And it involves a lot of things that we don't have direct control over. We can have an input into, and we can try to involve stakeholders in, but we don't dictate them, right? Like, and even if we were principals, we wouldn't control these things. These things are about schools as organizations. And so one of the things as we move to kind of hearing if people have questions for both of you, is we really emphasize the need for people to look at their school as an organization and look at what organizations need to do if they're going to change. And so you've heard several examples that both Tonya and Dorey gave that I want to just highlight. The first is don't ever play down your own ability to impact change. I mean, you can be a catalyst, you can be the leader, you can be the person that at least starts it. You will, though, pretty quickly, if you do that, realize that you have to have people come along with you. And I thought, Dorey, what you said so well a minute ago is there is that part of us, I think, as school clinicians, because maybe we self-select into this because we choose a field which is autonomous in some ways, right? Like we're not working in a big department. You don't have like 10 school psychs working with you. You don't have, I mean, Tonya in her role is a bit of an outlier because very few districts have big social work departments even, right? So what we know is that most of us get into this in part because we want to be someone in charge of our own kind of day-to-day, right? Like we want to have some, of that sense of we do our thing. And so if we say to people like us, we're going to try to change a school, maybe part of our energy might be initially to be kind of this like, lone wolf or Joan of Arc or somebody who really wants to kind of lead the charge, right? And that doesn't go very far, right? Like, I mean, it may feel like what we want to do, but we realize pretty quickly we need people along with us. And we also really need key stakeholders to really fight for it too, right? And I think you heard several examples in Dorey and Tonya's story about how other key players, administrators, funders, kind of changes in the larger society, those things came together to help them do this. The last thing I want to say that I think is really exciting that both of them did before they got to this map and did even more when they got there, is they were very interested in collecting data, and they were very interested in thinking about how data would help them make the case for what they wanted to do. And so that's a big part of what we'll do with you if you join this, is we'll ask you, what data does your school already collect? So we're not going to make you go off and create a bunch of data tools. What data could you use to advocate? What data doesn't exist that you need to go find and help create? And we have a whole class devoted to looking at data from a variety of different ways. So those are some things I wanted to just kind of underline some of the key stuff that these guys said. Any questions people have for Tonya and Dorey? If there's anything, or you want to, say something nice to Dorey's cat, please go ahead and do that as well. So while we're waiting, if people have any questions for you two, another thing I want to say is if people have questions about the certificate itself, I did put a link in the Facebook Live about like what is there and what you can do if you want to apply. Applications are due August 1st. So if you have questions on that, please go ahead and click that. But in the meantime, the last thing I want to kind of do for us is to ask both of you, if you were to kind of give advice to people that might be thinking about applying to this program, what would be some things you tell them? Like, obviously both of you have had good experiences and, you have good things to say, but what would be some things you do to encourage people to think about it? And what advice would you give them?
I can go first. I would say if you are thinking about it, think about it, but just do it, because there's always that little bit of like, oh, I don't know if this is the right decision for me. I think everybody has that. But if you're already looking for something, you are searching for something to improve your practice, to help you within the context of your school that you're in at the time. I have gained so much confidence from this program. I'm so sorry, this cat. He is like very persistent.
He's very confident too, Dorey.
He is so confident. He is like rules the house. Leadership skills. I feel like I grew into my leadership skills in the last 2 years. So I always knew that my role, just by nature, being semi-administrative, fell into a leadership capacity on certain levels. But I never felt really comfortable there. I think I can finally say I'm comfortable there now because of what I accomplished the last 2 years. And with my new administrators recently, one of them said to me, we were talking about something and I was kind of thinking, well, that's not really in my wheelhouse. I don't know if I should do that. And she said, she's new as of a year ago. She said, Dorey, everybody in this building views you as a leader. And that was the first time an administrator had said that to me. This new administration is seeing, I think, me take a, they don't know me any differently, actually, because prior to them is when I was starting to have burnout. And I just, and Dr. Kelly, you have been an amazing instructor, and I'll learned so much from you and really appreciated your flexibility in this program, as well as the other instructors. And the strengths-based class was really awesome for me, because that's kind of where I was like, I need stuff in my kit here to really help when I am seeing those kids, small group or individually. So that was a fantastic class to learn techniques. And the data class, I live and breathe data anyway. I'm a school psych, but I loved that class because it showed me other examples of other ways that people do things, and really helpful as well. So I would say, think about it, explore it, talk to people. But if you're really thinking about it, it's worth every bit of time and energy and cent that you spend. So
thank you, Dorey. I would just add to some Dorey said that it is, I think, our goal, and this is our 5th cohort we're hoping to start with this fall. We've had, as you can see, we have 2 amazing ladies coming from Nevada and northern Wisconsin, and we've had 9 states at this point that have been part of this program. And we've had people at every grade level. We've had alternative education, pre-K, and that's been, I think, a real strength of this program too, is I think when you said what you said, Dorey, just about kind of, finding some things about yourself, or maybe building some of your leadership skills or clinical skills. I really try hard to create a learning community where you all teach each other as well. And as I've been doing these, this is our next to last one we have of everybody in the cohort. Everybody has remarked on how much they learned from each other as well. And again, that should happen in all adult learning kind of things, but I think we've really tried to do that. And I admire what both of you have done in that as well. So Tonya, what would be your answer to people thinking about this? What would you say?
So we're in what am I in, the 3rd cohort right now?
Yeah, this is the 3rd cohort that's just graduated. Yeah.
So I think I received an email for the 1st cohort. And I remember when I received that email, I don't know how I would have gotten that, but somehow I came to my thing. And I remember looking into it and I thought, oh, school. I don't want to do this again. There's no way. It's 2 more years. Oh, I'm so busy. Absolutely not. I'm not going to do it. And then when it came across the 2nd time was obviously for the 3rd cohort. So that would be like 3 years later, right? If I'm the 3rd cohort, I can count, right? 1, 2, 3, there we go. 3 years later, I think I was in a different position, like I said, where I needed something to help to kind of guide me, because prior to that, I had been in a school on my own where my supervisor had put me in there as kind of a test to see what could school-based mental health do in a school. And I was able to create a program in that school where within like 2 years, the principal tells me all the time that it was because of the program that I had implemented there that they moved from a 2-star school to a 4-star school. And I didn't think that had anything to do with me. And then I moved into the liaison position and they immediately went back down to a 2-star school. And one of the things that Professor Kelly had asked in this program was, well, what did you do there that you could maybe replicate in other places? And I thought, well, I didn't do anything extra special. It was just me. So then I started thinking, well, if it's just me, then how do I help other people to do what it is that I did? So it was more than just me. So it was kind of me self-changing, like you were saying, about, my leadership abilities and the things that I could do. So if you have a gut inclination inside of you that says, what, change needs to happen in my schools, but I'm exhausted and I've tried and I don't know what to do. And I've shown that I can do it, but I can't get other people on board to do this. That's an exhausting place to be in. That's exactly where I was before starting this program. And then I learned in this that I think you're right, Professor Kelly, when you said, as social workers, school psych, school counselors, we do like the autonomy of, not, it's my way. Woohoo, it's Tanya's game. So you're on Tanya's show. So we're going to do it the way that I want to do it. And it is hard to take in other people's guidance and what they're saying and take in that constructive feedback and the just flat out, no, that's a sucky idea. It's not going to happen. And then not take it personally. And how do I fix that then? And what do I do? And I learned from this cohort was to definitely find like-minded people within your district or within your building, because they are there. I found a couple of psychs that, oh my gosh, without them, they propelled this even further on data collection and how to kind of work with things and different like-minded people that at first, when you tell them this stuff, they kind of give you this face and you think, oh no, it's going to be another rejection. They're not going to like it. And then all of a sudden what comes out of their mouth is absolutely brilliant. And you're like, oh my, where have you been all my life? Like, I need you in to do this. And so none of that would have happened without this program. So I agree with Dorey. If you're thinking about doing this, if you have that thought in your head, I waited an additional 2 years before I got it done. And maybe that was a good, I don't know. I mean, it worked out okay, fine, but do it. Just jump in and do it. It's 2 years, but that time is going to pass regardless. And the lessons and the education and the camaraderie and the support that you get in this program, it's going to surpass 2 years time in no time. And like Dorey said too, it doesn't matter the cost of this to me is priceless. So having you there as, not just as the professor, but as my mentor as well. Like, I've reached out to you on some very personal issues that I've had in my district, and you were like right there to help me with advice and what to do, and got my head straight again, right? Where I was like, ugh, and you just like really nice and are happy to do it. And it's so cool when I pick up a book and that I see someone is reading and, Professor Kelly's name is on it. And I go, wow, I just had a class with him. He just taught me. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, wait, what, the author? This dude? I'm like, yeah, I got to sell. Suddenly your clout goes up. So if you want the Professor Kelly sell, take the class. It's
my God, yeah. Yes, well, it's not the biggest get, but you're very kind with that. That's hilarious. I actually it's a great thing for us to kind of park on an end that we are really about kind of doing an ongoing follow-up for all of you, and I want to say a little bit more about that before we sign off with everybody. The first is that this cohort is graduating this month. We actually have an event next week. That is a 2-day summer institute, which is part of this program. If you do this program, you'll be invited to come to Chicago for 3 days and hang out with us. And these guys did that, and it was fantastic. This time we're doing it virtually for all the reasons everybody knows. But if you are able to join us, it is next week, July 16th and 17th. It's $120, 13 CEUs. We are going to take the very real issues we're all thinking about right now and worrying about, which is what would it take to reopen schools? And we're going to work through a long form case study where you will be part of an elementary or middle or high school, and you will play a role. You might be the school psych, you might be the custodian, you might be the school social worker, you might be the paraprofessional, and you're going to come up with your team a plan for reopening. And then once we hear from some outside experts and some really cool people I'm bringing on board, we're going to then tell you after day one, here's how it actually went. Here's what happened in October. Here's what happened in November. And that's going to be what we do for 2 days. And again, it's really related to what Tonya just said, and in her very nice, kind words to me, is we really want people to see themselves as being able to reach out to each other, share what's working, not feel like they have to be isolated. I've been very fortunate in my own little corner of this world where I've been able to really build a lot of relationships with a lot of amazing other practitioners and researchers. And so I really try to bring those people in as well. So we will, for that event, have Jonathan Singer, who's one of my good friends, and he does the Social Work Podcast, and he's an expert on suicide prevention and crisis. And we're going to have Robin Kogan, who is the Relentless School Nurse blogger, and she's an expert in school nursing, and she's going to be talking about, you guessed it, COVID and how we reopen. So all of that stuff is ways for you to get with us, even if you decide not to apply this program this year. Like Tonya said, it took her a couple of years. The second thing is we are very committed to continuing this work. If you get through the program, you get your 15 credits and all that, we are very committed to this work continuing on our various platforms, schoolsocialwork.net and the network. So that's another place we hope to see you at as well. Yeah, well, that's what I wanted to say. The group was very satisfied, I think, with you guys. They didn't have any questions for us. They seemed to be okay with what we said. And we had about 15 to 20 people over the course of the stretch, so that's fantastic. We will be back next week. Before we sign off, just so you know, I have one more group of this cohort that I'll be talking to, and we'll also be talking about the actual event I just ran through a little bit. We'll be meeting next Wednesday at noon Central Time. So we are signing off now. Dorey and Tonya, not to be too clipped about signing off, but I think I have to quit the meeting to sign off on Facebook Live. So I think we're going to say goodbye. And certainly, if you all want to reach out to me, you can reach out to me via the website, and I will look forward to talking to you and Dorey next week. Okay?
Wonderful. Thank you,
Sounds
guys.
great. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for everything. Bye.